I do believe that we all have a destiny. We either live it or we escape because we're afraid to live our own reality. I feel blessed. I didn't really have choices. I have been forced through dreams, through my body responses, through illness, to surrender. The surrender feels like death, but if you're going to live your full soul's journey and find the spiritual dimension, you're going to go this way and surrender the old life to the new. I do not see surrender as failure at all. I would have simply died if I hadn't seen that in the death was the birth of a whole new consciousness. Everybody is gone. Total silence, where once the sweet birds sang. I hear them off, very off, way, way down the hall. Adam shouts. They're, quote, ready and rolling. What exactly I'm supposed to do when they get here, I do not know. Oh, I'm describing you people doing all of this.
You mean filming?
Pardon?
You mean making a film on you?
Making a film on me, yes. I'm writing, but I don't know your name again. I've forgotten.
Sanjay.
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 Is that Indian?
It's an Indian name. Yeah.
Indian.
This is Marion Woodman. Before I attended one of her workshops, I knew very little about Marion, but like thousands of others around the world, I quickly fell under her spell and found myself making this film about her life.
This is who I am in this moment. And I was free. I could live it. I could let it go.
With over 500,000 books in print and a foundation that spans the globe, Marion Woodman is a world-renowned Jungian analyst, author, and teacher, best known for her work on feminine psychology and addiction. Dr. Carl Gustav Jung emphasized understanding the psyche through exploring the worlds of dreams, art, mythology, world religion, and philosophy. Unlike his mentor Sigmund Freud, Jung thought spiritual experience was essential to our well-being. This Jungian world is the foundation of Marion's work and is mirrored throughout her life. Marion is taught with many of the preeminent teachers of our time. Ram Dass, Buddhist teacher Jack Kornfield, leader of the men's movement Robert Bly, spiritual teacher and philosopher Jean Houston, and most recently, the celebrated mystic and author Andrew Harvey.
I'm very challenged and very honored to be working with Andrew Harvey. I've heard about him for years. I never met him until a month ago and found it a most extraordinary experience.
Everything in the universe is paradox. Everything in the universe is a unity of opposites, and the basic process of the universe is a death process leading to rebirth.
Andrew is our guide through the labyrinth of Marion's life. He was the youngest person ever to receive Oxford's highest academic honor. He's the co-editor of the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, a renowned translator of the Sufi mystical poet Rumi, author of over 30 books, and founder of Sacred Activism.
Everyone knows there is a tremendous crisis going on, and that there is a great death happening now, environmentally, socially, politically, economically, and that this great death potentially threatens the whole of nature and the whole human experiment. There is also a great birth taking place, a birth of a new kind of humanity.
What Andrew's talking about, and I think this is one reason why he wants to work with Marion, what Andrew's talking about, Marion has been through. She's been through the end of the world. And so have I been through the end of the world with her. And we've come through to the other side of that.
I love Marion for many reasons. I love her as a person. I love her as a writer. I love her as an extraordinary purveyor of the ideas of Carl Jung. I love her as one of the great pioneers of our understanding of the sacred feminine. But why Marion is so important for me, and I think for many thousands of other people, is that she is a sign of this birth. She is a sign that it is possible to live a full, passionate, dignified, deeply concerned human life with profound mystical awareness and really embody the divine energies and the divine peace and the divine passion. What I'm saying is, of course, rather exalted, but one of the things that I love most about Marion is that she's an extremely down-home, down-to-earth, salty, direct person with immense humor. And to me, that's a great clue of what this birth is really going to be like. It's not going to be fancy and grand. It's going to be, and is, very embodied and real. Hello, my darling. I'm sorry to scare you.
I didn't expect you were going to come over the back of my neck.
I brought you something. I brought you Margot Fontaine, the embodied divine feminine, whom we love so.
Thank you. Thank you. That is just beautiful. Ross and I were in London the year that she and Nutrieron were at the top. And so we saw them.
Oh, my God.
Many times.
It was an electrifying fusion.
Totally. I mean,
it's so
his body
amazing.
would just go right up.
Amazing.
You could see the archetypal energy come in and it just soar. I saw her when she, when she was about 54, she closed down in England. I was at the performance.
Oh, my God.
And she was like a perfect diamond. Just everything was absolutely right. But when he came, she was incandescent. I mean, it was a pearl, just every brand new shade of coloring. And she had the perfection before without the radiance, and then her whole being lit up. And I mean, you just couldn't help but cry.
When you see them dancing together, you really do see the sacred marriage in operation. This is what we're trying to integrate inside ourselves.
Yes, that's exactly what
That's what I'm watching when I'm watching her and him dance. I'm watching how it could be if I or anyone succeeded really in uniting the profound clarity and vigor of the masculine with the ecstasy and passion and heart of the feminine. I think all of our lives are a drama of the light and the dark, the transcendent part of us and the earthly part of us. And you once told me that when you were a child, there were two Marions, and that these two Marions have been there battling it out for your life, all your life.
All my life.
Can you speak about those two Marions as a child?
There was the person that lived from Monday till Saturday, and she never put on shoes unless she had to. She had a corncob pipe, hair never combed. I had a gaudy bracelet. I was gypsy. When I went up to the woods, I had no fear because I had my little Joan of Arc with me. And she would protect me. And I knew that sense of presence that would protect me. On Sunday, we combed my hair. Big deal. Because the comb wouldn't go through. And so I had to sit there and grit my teeth until the ringlets were in place. No pipe, no nothing of that. But I did have a pretty dress. And I loved church. I loved it. I loved going to hear the choir and to hear the organ and to hear my father preach and tell his stories. I went every place he went. You know, all the things that my father did with the congregation, I loved doing. My life was birth, marriage, death. But in all the pictures that were taken on Sunday, I'm clutching my skirt like that. And so there was an obvious tension.
This has been the deep journey of your life to becoming the dancer, the person who can hold the opposites, the person who can say yes to creation, but also yes to destruction, yes to pain, and yes to joy, yes to the shadow, and yes to the light.
And recognizing that they belong to each other.
They are each other
They
in
are
different ways.
In that if something doesn't die, there's no nurturing for the new.
And something alive is dying.
And something alive.
What is alive is
Yeah,
dying,
it's dying.
and when it dies, it provides the fecund soil for new life.
That's right. I was raised in my father's garden, and it was a magnificent garden. In the Depression, we didn't have anything but what was in the garden to eat. Once you have lived in the garden and you have worked with the earth and the quiet patience that comes with that, you see you plant something, it grows. And you watch it flower, you watch it through the summer and into the fall. Winter comes, yes, there's death, but out of that winter comes spring. Death is essential to life. That's Kali. Kali was death in the service of life. Death is going to happen often in your lifetime, or you're going to go through a death of something in the soul. But out of that, something new will be born. That's what I think about the earth right now. We are going through a death. But for that to manifest, something's going to have to happen to the soul of human beings. And we're going to go through anguish to get there. But that's life. If I look back through my life, I can see what had to die in order to give me life. Painful as it was at the time, I thank God for it now.
Marion, I want to talk to you about the extreme world crisis that we are in. And I want to talk specifically about one thing that deeply distresses me, and I know it deeply distresses you, which is this really shattering depression and paralysis that we are in. Why aren't we doing a lot more to deal with this terrible crisis on every level that we're in?
Well, from my point of view, I would say, you know, I do a lot of work with addicts, and I think we are acting like addicts. We have all this wonderful life, but we cannot believe we can lose it. That is too horrible a thought. So the fear is expressed in adding more and more stuff, stealing more and more from the earth, and acting more and more irresponsible is a word, just irresponsible, and even angry. See, we're living in a civilization that doesn't understand metaphor. So they tend to concretize everything and not even know that that's what's going on, except that God doesn't matter anymore. Ritual doesn't matter. But the God that they didn't find in the church or in the woods or wherever, they're finding in the bottle. And the union that they don't find in making love, they find through another kind of sexuality, however that goes. But the union that they yearn for, you know, that total coming together, they can't find because they concretize the concept, and it kills them.
And the person who wants abundance, who wants to revel in abundance, can't think of it in terms of a rapture before nature, a rapture for the sea or a gazelle, thinks of it in terms of stuff. Yes. Stuffs his or her life with stuff.
Everything is concretized.
Everything is materialized in a gross way, and that requires the strip mining of nature, the destruction of the environment.
When I was a child, I was fascinated by death. I was a minister's daughter, and my father took me to many funerals. One night, my father took me to the funeral home. He was going to be burying a friend of his, and the friend was in the front room at the funeral home. The father was in there with the family, pretty broken up himself. So I just wandered back through the funeral home, and on my journey, I saw this cradle, the most beautiful cradle I had ever seen. It was sitting up on a pillar up there. So I decided I would have to see it. So I got a chair and pulled the chair over, put it beside this pillar, got up on it to look at the cradle. I looked into the cradle and I saw this most beautiful doll. For me, it was a doll, except that I'd never seen a doll quite like this doll. She had on this soft white dress with little pink flowers. She was exquisite. I'd never seen anything so beautiful in this lovely cradle. And I just had to have her. So I put my hands down and I picked her up, and I was nervous. So I put her right against my chest and held her close. And I knew it was not a doll I had in my arms. But I also knew it was not a baby. So I thought, this must be death that I have in my arms. And I had no idea what to do with death. So I just stood there, holding her, trying not to fall off the chair and not to let her fall out of my arms. But I was utterly involved with death. I wasn't afraid. I just stood there with her. And suddenly there's this terrible shrieking, yelling. It was the parents. And they were terrified that I would drop her. And in the midst of this chaos, my father came in and said, "Leave the child to me." And I was so thankful. So this relationship, this to life, death, this is why I have this huge love of Emily Dickinson, and have since the age of 12, because she also lived right next to a graveyard. Emily Dickinson saved my life. No question about that in my mind. She went through the same kind of trauma that I did when I was young, in my teens. I had nobody to talk to. Everybody just thought I was overreacting to everything. But when I found Emily, she had the same language that I needed. And so I could memorize her poems and sit in the rocking chair and rock as hard as I wanted to rock and do those poems, memorize them out loud. And that was my therapy.
Could you just recite a poem that you love? Is there a poem that you especially love of hers and that you remember loving so much then?
Our lives are Swiss, so calm, so cool, till some odd afternoon, the Alps neglect their curtains, and we look further on. Italy stands the other side, wild like a ghost between the solemn Alps, the siren Alps, forever intervene.
Again, this wonderful duality between Switzerland, good Marion, and Italy, wild Marion.
It's true.
The same.
I never put it together like that, but that is absolutely true.
But just as Emily Dickinson's solitude became extreme, so your solitude grew and grew and grew, and with it, a tremendous perfectionism. Can you describe that process in your own words, Marion?
I had a passion for the microscope. And so I went into biology. I started out to be a biologist and loved it. I used to go over there many, many nights and just work with the microscope and work. So it seemed I was on my way to be a scientist. And then I realized that the emotional part of me, the feeling side, was not operating at all. I loved the work, but that was it. So I thought, I've got to do something to get these feelings out. So, without telling anybody, except my parents, I went into English. And yes, I did get an emotional involvement there.
But you also became anorexic, didn't you? And how did the anorexia evolve? How did this start? How did this passion for perfection, to drop the body, to drop the whole of the gypsy in you and go off into the light, go off into this free-flying...
I got a touch of being in a social world, in a way where I really belonged. Because by sheer accident, I read for a play and got the part. But that also brought up that I was too heavy. My weight was too heavy. And, you know, I wanted to be most beautiful on the stage. And so that the year in teachers training was really the year the anorexia started. And I had a marvelous time with the theater there, got a job, and went to Northern Ontario. Once you got in there in the wintertime, that was it. At that time, there was no airplane, nothing else. You got in and you were there. And the entertainment was dancing. And many of the students at the school hardly spoke English. It was mostly European. So their feeling about dance was European. And it was European dances that we were doing. But they expected people to do it right. You had to know what you were doing. So I learned that kind of perfection, you know, that was essential. And I lost about 70 pounds that year. And then I was really sick. Only I discern infinite passion and the pain of finite hearts that yearn. It's a lovely balancing of the yearning for the infinite and having to be satisfied with the finite. You know, that's basically what being an analyst is. You sit in the chair and you listen to the depth of the passion that is driving someone, where the infinite passion is pounding in the body. But the object is wrong. In any addiction, I would say, having worked at it for so long, and looking at our world now, which is addicted, there's a killer. Any addict knows that death is the end of the addiction.
Who was your killer?
Who?
Who was your inner killer?
Oh, I would say it was God. It was a desire for that kind of perfection, where the desire for perfection rejects life.
Marion, your work has been a pioneering celebration of the feminine. And part of the reason why you pioneered the celebration is because you lived in your own body the massacre of the feminine.
It had those exaggerated poles because of being a minister's daughter with a highly, highly developed spiritual yearning. And on the other side, this wild gypsy energy that refused to be tamed.
And your whole life became then the search to honor both in their own terms and to bring them together in a mystery of presence.
That's what it became. And that's what all my work is about. Trying to hold both of those. Because I know if the gypsy dies, I die. So that energy has to be continually given a chance to speak, to dance. It has to be expressed or it is a killer. There's a rage in it because I see what's happening to the planet. I see what's happening to religion and people not paying any attention to ritual and all the things that I think are essential to a human life. And they're just laughed at. What is there to worship? So we find ourselves on a planet that most people in power make the earth into an enemy. I mean, and what's going on in terms of chicken farms and pig farms and all these, I mean, they never see the light of day, they never see the sunshine, and we are children of the sun. And we eat those chickens that have never seen the sun, or even our educational system would kill the body if it could. I mean, the way we treat the body in our culture is just drug it. Anything wrong, just take your drugs and you'll be silent. You won't be better, you'll be silent. And your body will be silent. And that's what it should be. Shut it up. What we're talking about is a breakdown of the planet at a physical level, emotional, spiritual,
But I think what we're also talking about is somebody who went through those breakdowns in her own life and broke through. And this is so hopeful for the world, because when you have an archetypal journey, you understand how the archetypes work, and you understand that death can lead to rebirth. It doesn't have to lead to annihilation.
And those archetypes that seem to be carrying death are often the ones where the birth is right there, ready to leap out. In a marriage, for example, where you can see that the death of the marriage is there. But maybe it's the death of this marriage as it is, where you're mummy projecting onto little boy and little boy projecting on mummy. Maybe that has to die. And so you grow up, if you stay with it, and the archetypal journey takes you to another place in the marriage. Ross and I say we've had 4 marriages. And we have. Because we came to the end of accepting the projections we had on each other. And that kept changing.
When you first met Ross, what was that like? I don't even know how you met, so what was that first meeting like?
That's such a crazy one that I really wouldn't like to tell on television. I don't think I should do that, Adam. I mean, it really is destiny.
Come in. In one sense, in one very essential sense, I don't think Marion and I ever met. I think we have always been together, like before the beginning and after the end. But I think there are some accidental things that happen in space and time in which we did seem to come together from the eternity in which we always already existed. How would that be? I had her brother, Bruce, in my English undergraduate class on the Romantics. He was an enthusiastic disciple of Shelley's poetry. And such was the nature of his discipleship that he invited me one day to come around to his house and meet other members of his family, particularly his sister, who had a stronger feeling for poetry than he did, which certainly turned out to be true.
There was an instant recognition of somebody that wasn't putting on an act, wasn't trying to be nice, wasn't trying to show off, just somebody who was really interested in what I had to say. Not any cover-up on my part either. Who are we? In this little tiny moment of time, is there a meeting? Yes, there was.
You could almost say that vows were made, not by either of us. We didn't make the vows, but there was something hovering in the air, that there was
destiny
afoot. It was then, as it were, a fate, but it might in time become a destiny.
You see, I think that people who reject getting married, and they say, you know, what's the point of getting married? Or what's the point of it now? What's the point of bothering with a funeral? Why, the hospital can take care of the body. The soul doesn't have a chance to make the Passover. So it's still stuck at a place where you cannot bring yourself to stand on the line and say, I accept this, this goes, whoever I was there is finished, a new person is being born through this ritual. And I put myself on the line, I stand to it.
I go back a long way in your history, Marion, and I remember very well when you were an English teacher at South and you began to transform your own classroom and it required a very generous principal who allowed you to tear down the walls and join two classrooms and create your own theater by taking out all the desks.
It was soul presence in that room.
And would you say, Marion, though, that the soul presence in that room was body presence?
It was.
Yeah.
It was body being soul, and soul being body.
Embodiment, I think, was the word that you used. Yes.
I would say that the metaphors from the poetry would come into their body, like Blake's tiger, for example, take that into their body and be that tiger. I've always believed that my mission in life was to find the feminine and to help other people, and I say people, not women, women and men, to find out what their genuine femininity is. And that leads to a new masculine. What is that relatedness that is the feminine? What is that emotional vibrancy that comes from the body right through the whole being? And men have to find this too. I'm talking about an energy like a wind that blows through the body, through all the musculature and the nerves of the body. And that sensibility and sensitivity is the reality of the person.
Marion, your work has been in deep and profound ways dedicated to the restoration of the divine feminine, of the sacred feminine. And your work thrills me because it constantly celebrates how the feminine works to restore a shattered humanity. How does this force actually come in and do the work?
Well, I've come at it step by step by step through my own work. You know, I started out with the anorexic addiction, and in order to be healed, I just went step by step myself, basically. I knew I was out of my body because every time I became sick, it had to do with spirit going so high that it couldn't be held in the body. It couldn't deal with the grief. And so when I finally realized that I had to do something changed 100% or die, I started to work with dreams and images, particularly writing. And my motivation there was that I felt proud of myself when I was creating from myself. I felt there was somebody inside that was doing those pictures or writing. My way of working with addictions is to try to find where they are creative. Where can the real light come in? The real light. Or the real God, or the real goddess. So that the God creates is the energy that can pull you from a satanic energy that is taking you into death to a living energy that will take you into your own creation. And then I began to have dreams of this black goddess. And she was very noble, and I could never see her face, but I would make my obeisance to her, and she would say, "Lower."
Lower?
I had to bow lower. I was already on my knees, but I thought, yeah, how does one get lower? So in this spongy, mossy place, I did get my elbows down onto the ground, my hands onto the ground, and I was kneeling before this being. And again, the voice came lower, very loving and very firm. And I was quite nervous, so I just lay flat out on the ground, face down, put my hands out, just full on this very mossy, warm, black earth. And I really felt the blackness and the moss, and it was good.
What do you think her injunction to you to go lower means? What does that mean?
You have not yet learned humility, girl. You must lie flat on the ground and feel the living pulse of the earth and know that you are part of that pulse, and not experience it as demeaning, but as a lesson that had to be learned on the way to knowing that feminine presence.
Why can you only know the presence of the dark feminine through this radical embrace of the ground, of the moss, of the earth?
Well, of course, I think that she is of the earth. The dark feminine to me is the earth. We live on our mother. And this globe going around in space is our mother who feeds us physically. Then you think of the glory of the flowers and the glory of springtime and the perfume, the color, the shapes, and the soul rises to the spiritual dimension. All our senses come alive in her presence. So I was very, very much in touch with the spirit, God's spirit. But I had no sense of God in the earth. I believe that we are going to be forced into a recognition of the feminine as divine. And again, love the earth. Recognize the creation that is the earth. This earth. And the child that can be born from that earth. And that is the Black Madonna for me. But it's not only earth, it is the spirit that's in the earth and the glory and the beauty of all those living things. And so this experience of moving lower and smelling the earth and feeling its energy and opening my own body as part of that earth. That was a new experience, but very exciting. I felt a new energy coming in.
Can I ask you about that ball, that orb back there? Can you tell us about...
Well, you know, I took a trip around the world. You see, there is a destiny that shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will. I knew that there was something in me that was wild and determined to live or die, didn't care which. And so as I grew older, and coming up to 40, this other side said, I am going to live, Marion, whether you like it or not. And so I went to India. And that's where I certainly met the Black Madonna, because it was that earth and the glory of the earth and the creation of the earth, just looking right there. At everywhere you looked, you couldn't miss it. And I found it extremely terrifying and equally exciting. But then I just became I just was so exhausted I couldn't move. And then I became really sick. So I stayed in my room. There was nobody, absolutely nobody to take care of me. I knew nobody. And so I just lay in bed reading Shakespeare's sonnets, because I was running a very high temperature, and I read my passport just to be sure who I was. And then at the bottom of this tree, I decided that I had to start relating, or I wasn't going to make it. So I got dressed and went down to the foyer of the hotel. And I was feeling very shy and very frightened. And so I sat down on a couch right in the corner. And this woman came along, a large, very dark woman, and squeezed between me and the end of the couch. There was a whole couch she could have sat on. But no, she squeezed. And I had, of course, to move over to make room for her. And then I wasn't quite sure how I felt. And she pushed with her arm against mine. She had no sleeves, nor did I. And this warm, warm arm just came right down my whole arm. She didn't say hello, nothing. She just put her arm there. And I thought, it's so lovely to feel that warm arm on mine. And there's a black arm and a white arm. So I just pushed back and really took in the feel of relaxing into a beautiful black mother. And she was lovely. But she never spoke to me, and I didn't speak to her. And then gradually, she pushed against my whole body. And every place she touched me, I was alive again. And then I realized we were at the other end of the couch. She kept pushing, and I was sort of nervous, so I pushed. We got the other end of the couch. And I thought I should go to my room, because the container was starting to break. Couldn't hold it. So I did go to my room. The next day, I decided to go down again. And again she came. And again we went to the other end of the couch. But now I'm stronger and able to eat and able to take in what's happening. So this happened maybe 5 or 6 times, day after day. And then a man came to me, an Indian man. And he said, my wife won't have to come and see you anymore. And I said, why? And he said, because you're not going to die. He said, I saw that you were dying in the foyer the other day, so I sent my wife to sit with you. But you're going to be living. So that was my first experience of the Black Madonna. And that woman, unquestionably, at the calling of her husband. See, I think it's extremely important that he was the one that saw the situation and set up the possibility of healing.
I think the Black Madonna is present in the whole experience that you're describing, because she works paradoxically, doesn't she? So she destroyed you, she brought you to the edge of death, and then she appeared in human form to heal you.
So it was paradox all the way. That something had to be destroyed in order for me to give up my ego plans. I had to give up the perfection and give up what I would call now that golden spirit world that wanted whatever, quote, I thought perfection was. I had to completely let it go.
She had to break you.
She had to break me in order to make room for the genuine feminine and the genuine masculine to come through.
I didn't go with Marion on her trip virtually around the world.
So at home, he took a sentence out of each one of my letters that I sent him while I was away and made this pot.
I decided I would like to preserve this trip around the world as she was experiencing it.
Indian music, elusive, mystical, full of pain. They bathe men and women stripped to the waist. They sleep, they are born, copulate, and die, all with their goats, dogs. Only the very rich are allowed in here on Coronation Day. The happy stay outside, and I can love them all. It sits over there in silence, but it's a living entity, I can tell you. And that's the thing that changed my life, that journey. I was one person before I went, and a very different one when I came back. Insofar as the whole pattern of death and destruction leading to new life, that is what happened in my experience. I couldn't relate when I came back. And fortunately, again, destiny, my husband had a fellowship in England, and we went to England, and I was able to find Dr. Bennett, a Jungian analyst. It was through that work that I did with him that I was able to make some kind of meaning that would reconnect me to life here again. And of course, that ultimately became my new life's work. New life's work.
And it was a Jungian world.
It was a Jungian world. Though he rarely mentioned Jung, and if I used to read the Jungian books, and I would go back and I'd say, I've got it all figured out. This complex is fighting this complex, and this complex is working this way. And he said, I don't talk Japanese. Don't give me that stuff. And I started to dream, wonderful dreams. I mean, I always dreamed, but these were incredible dreams. I can't tell you what it meant that somebody could recognize this huge part of me and say, it does make sense. And you aren't crazy by paying attention to this. So, of course, we worked very, very hard on the dreams. And I realized that this was my gold. And that indeed, the pattern of the dream would show me where the energy was trying to go, when I had no idea where to go. There'd be this little hook on the end of the dream that said, "This way, Marion." That's true for everybody. The last little part of the dream is where the energy is trying to go. If we think of the dream as taking energy in the metaphor, in the picture that is the dream, what is the energy that that picture is releasing, if it has a chance? If you don't work on it, it will never be released. It's just a dead letter. If you don't use the material that your body and brain, because the metaphor comes out of the body, is transformed into an image of the brain. If you don't work with that, you're throwing the gold out. And the healing power is in the metaphor.
The dream speaks like a great poet,
It does.
bringing together disparate images to reach secret depths of unsuspected feeling.
Exactly. So that the image brings together the imagination, the seeing, the hearing, all these senses are brought into play. And that's true with trauma. You can cover it up, but sooner or later, you have to be strong enough to endure the impact of imagination, intelligence, and feeling for the totality.
Everything you're describing, you learned through your analysis with Dr. Bennett, and your own self-study, but also through going to Zurich, where your life would take you not just to be an analyst, but to become an analyst. You studied to become an analyst at the Jung Institute. What happened to you when you came back from Zurich? What happened to your marriage? What kind of person were you? You spent how many years there?
5.
5 years. 5 years. Now, you were back and forth, but 5 years. And in those 5 years, you were becoming stranger and stranger to me.
Every time I came home, it was stranger.
Stranger and stranger, because you were going through a radical inner transformation of your own that appeared to be going on quite independently of me. I never knew quite what I was going to meet when you got off those planes.
Nor did I.
And there was always a crisis.
He got thinking and wanted to have the marriage sort of in a new way. And so he was lying on one couch in our living room, and I was on the other, and our beautiful big Weimaraner dog was on the carpet in between, Samantha. So we were talking back and forth, was all we did, and very quietly he said, "Marion, would you repeat our wedding vows?" And knowing that something must be up, I said, "What is it you want me to say?" And he said, "I promise to love, honor, and obey."
Love, honor, obey. And by obey, I meant only this. Marion, if I asked you, in the name of this marriage, to give up Zurich, because I find it too threatening to live with, would you do it? That was the context of the word obedience. And you looked at me and very quietly said no. Now that quiet no did not settle easily. It was like a bullet to the brain. At that moment, I felt I had lost you. Which is to say, I had lost a certain image of myself in relation to marriage and in relation to you. Which was really behind it a certain power over your decisions and movements that I somehow expected that you would sacrifice if necessary, or at least surrender to my will. If you like, I had been seeing through a glass darkly. But now I was seeing face to face. And I didn't know whether I liked what I saw.
And there was such an electric charge went off in our living room that I could hardly believe what happened. It wasn't, there was no sound. It was just this terrific change of energy. And Sammy, our beautiful fine runner, stood up and fell down. Her front paws buckled. And she was in perfectly good health. And then she went to walk again and
got up and ran into the wall and had a stroke. And Samantha was put down. She had the stroke that I would have had.
And that I would have had.
Yeah.
If I had not said no.
Yeah.
So we both said, you know, a sacrifice, a huge animal sacrifice has been made here. And we have got to really take it in and comprehend what happened and change it.
It's a different masculine that can take that no. It's a different masculine.
I had to have my freedom to make my feminine choice.
And when I realized that what I was in love with was your free soul,
That's right.
that could stand to its own truth, I began to see what you meant by the masculine as not power, not patriarchy, but the new masculine, and I would say that was its birth.
Masculinity and patriarchy are not synonymous. The true masculine is not the enemy of the feminine. It's not into power the way patriarchy is into power. Who do you think you are comes from power.
Right.
And as many mothers say that as fathers.
Absolutely.
And so that the masculine, when you see people really trying to bring in the sword of discretion, which is powerful with the masculine, and they need that strong masculine to protect the embodiment of the feminine.
Of course.
And to use the discrimination, this
That's
is of
it.
value to me, this is of no value, and that's going to go.
The masculine is also the lover of the feminine, the protector of the feminine.
And the feminine in himself as well as in the woman.
Right.
And she's also got to develop her masculinity so that you have a foursome, as it were, relating a developed conscious masculine and feminine in both the man and the woman, or whoever the partner is. But reconciling those opposites is the key to a new birth.
Well,
I
the
just
father-mother has to come together for there to be a birth.
Yeah.
Transcendence and immanence have to come together for there to be a birth of the divine human.
And father and mother, as we're talking about it now, I would see as soul and spirit. Mother as body, Black Madonna, earth, soul, embodied soul, and spirit as that swan, that light energy that is so powerful, you can't take it for very long. It just comes in and drops its sperm, a whole new life is possible. And so we're dealing with what Jung calls the inner marriage. I mean, I'm sure every religion, Shiva Shakti, and in the Chinese world, yin and yang, it's that union of those two energies that all those great religions are working towards.
And that's why relationship, especially the long alchemical work of a marriage, is the perfect place to work out the inner marriage.
That is exactly true. We went through a huge crisis when I came back from Zurich because I was doing my best to fit in to an old situation, and it was not working. I like to get up in the morning early, and so I was by myself in the living room. He got up and came out to the kitchen. He had on his old black watch house coat, little spindly legs down below. And I was sitting in the chair in the living room. He was trying to put an egg in this little egg holder. I don't know if you know these things, but they hold one egg for poaching. So he worked at it, and the whole thing fell apart. The egg fell on the floor. And I just thought, you know, I could have done better than this. I could really have done a lot better than this. And then I was watching him, just sort of in reverie. And he went over to the other side of the cupboard, and he was cutting bread. And that hand that I truly loved was holding it, and I could remember planting tulips together, seeing the hand, the tulip bulbs, seeing the hand with our animals, seeing that hand making love. And there was the most incredible flood came up in me. Just no questions asked. This is the man I love. And he felt it. And he turned around and looked at me. And he said, "Marion, would you like some coffee?" And that was the end of will we or won't we stay together. From that point on, we were going to work it out. Now, I'm not saying that we haven't, as I say, we've had 4 marriages. But they've all come about through working on projection, solving that layer, up comes another layer. So we're both working on the unconscious layer by layer. It's bottomless. But that's life. I mean, that getting to know the soul, each on their own and with the other at the deepest level.
Marion, now let's go to perhaps the greatest and most difficult initiation and threshold that you have endured in this extraordinary journey of yours, and one in which you describe in actually my favorite of your books, Bone, which I think is a masterpiece of nakedness and ferocity and honesty. Your cancer, your experience with cancer.
The big lesson was once again surrender.
When Marion was undergoing the severe diagnosis of cancer, to the point where she was told, and I was called in, that this was terminal. Nothing more could be done. No more radiation. And whatever Marion wanted to do, she should do, quote, now. And Marion said, which I thought was wonderful, there's nothing I want to do. I just want to go on doing what I've always done. And he said, you're a lucky woman.
You describe in Bone this dream of the gypsy who imploded and exploded you back into life.
She was a big, powerful woman, and long hair, and strong, and in a canoe, coming through reeds. And there was a child with her, a 5-year-old, with the bracelet and the corncob pipe. That dream, I didn't have time to work on it before I went to the hospital. But I knew that there was stuff in that dream that I had to pull out. And then when I got really sick, the next year, I thought, I'm going to go back to that dream. That's where I'll get the energy to heal myself.
I got pretty black images of what Marion was going through, and I went down in it until finally Marion said to me, Ross, I want you to get out of here. This is my death, not yours. You have no right to come in here, and there's no way you can. It's not your death, it's mine.
Then I ended up in a wheelchair, totally. But I would still try to be her and that little girl. She brought back that I can do it. And let me come in and live that reality that is in my bones.
In Bone you write, if only I could release Gypsy from her bindings, pull her into consciousness, let the terror of annihilation go. Gypsy comes up from darkness to meet Swan coming down from light. If they could come together, I might be whole. Surrender, Marion. Be a lily of the field, even a little clod.
Marion got stronger through her, quote, death, unquote. So did I. I got stronger by getting out of it. Marion got stronger by going more deeply into it.
I have to point out, I had been working for 6 months trying to pull that energy into my cells. And I couldn't see any change for 6 months. But when the moment arrived, I was ready. We had this wonderful Dutch friend who loved Canadians because the Canadians freed Holland. And he invited us to his birthday party. We went, and we had a very nice time. The house was full of tulips. We sat on the couch. And at 10 o'clock, Ross said, we better go, Marion. You're very tired. And I said, yes. We got to the door, to the threshold, talking thresholds, and behold, here's a man in a tomato-colored suit and big yellow lapels playing a tuba in the door. And it was wondrous to behold. The tuba filled the whole threshold. And behind were 12 other instruments, all horns. So they made terrific noise. They came into the house, all Dutch. They came into the house. The house was just shaking. But they were playing the music that I danced to in Northern Ontario. And I had not heard that music since I'd been up there. And I was so excited by this that this energy started to come up in me, and it said, well, Marion, you can sit on this chair until you rot, but I am going to dance. And I was out of that chair and across that floor, and a Dutchman that had not been to the party before came walking in the door. He didn't know that I was an old woman in a wheelchair, and he just grabbed me. And we went through the house, dancing to this marvelous music. And I thought, I can do it. I can do it. Something was just discharged into me. And somehow I was able to overcome the fear. And it's never returned. The ego surrendered to the soul. And therefore, there's this incredible love of life as it is.
What are you writing now, Marion?
Too late.
What do you mean?
Now, too late. They are still filming me. Closer, he says, closer. I wish I had persevered with my typing, but I did not. I got cancer, and now I can never be automatic. My body rhythms do not swell like the sea when I type. I don't feel the great swell of feeling. My toes do not squeal. My gut does not growl. My eyes do not shine. No, if I had learned, if I had mastered typing long ago, it would be good. But now it's late. Too late. It's very humbling. That's what I would say. It's very humbling to go through that kind of anguish and pain and to come out on the other side so glad to live. I died into life. Things have to die. If you're going to have any progress in the world, you've got to get rid of what is dead in your own life, too, looking at that. What has died for me, what is no longer of meaning, has to be let go to make room for the new, it's just nature, for the new life. If you're going to grow, you are going to accept the death and accept the birth and feed the birth. You know the picture of the clown with his foot just over the precipice ready to, and his little dog, his instinct with him. And there he is, perched, as it were, on immortality. That's where I am, perched. And it's terrific. I love it. Because it makes me experience every moment.
You know, Marion, that at the center of the Milky Way there is a black hole. And the Milky Way is dancing in a spiral because it is being sucked down into the black hole that will smithereen every single atom in it. So that black hole is simultaneously creating and destroying.
In my own life, as in everyone's life, there have been many little deaths. When I look back on these experiences, Each one of them made way for new life. Our planet itself is now facing such a death, a shedding of its outworn skin. If we can embrace the shift consciously, creatively rather than negatively, we will see new life stirring within us. Earth is one country, and all of us are its citizens. My work, my life, is committed to the realization of that reality.